Hi, Dr. Indanil Basure. It's a pleasure to see you again and continue the conversation that we started a few weeks ago about yogic sciences and the applications, the evidence-based applications of yoga in medicine. It's so great to see you again. Welcome back.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Dr. Viz, for having me again. It's really a pleasure. Both of us have been doing the same thing, trying to spread the truth about being more healthy, being more fit, living longer, staying younger. So, but why don't, I mean, we had a very nice discussion last time talking about different aspects of yoga. Why don't we start with the root? And the root is health. So you've been a physician for many decades now, treating people, telling them how to be healthy. Why don't you give us an understanding? What really do we mean by health? People are sometimes confused. What does health mean? What does being healthy mean? You want to go ahead on that, buddy?
Yeah, that is such a good question, and I have actually put a lot of thought into it. And yeah, I've been in practice for over 2 decades, and it took me a while to realize that health is not just the absence of disease, right? As doctors, we think, oh, people come to us when they're sick, we give them some medicine or do some procedure, and we make them better, and so we essentially extract their disease from them. Is that truly health? It isn't. And it turns out that WHO actually had a definition of health when WHO was first established in 1946. So the World Health Organization set the definition of health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And further, they defined the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health as one of the fundamental rights of every human being, without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic, or social condition. So I thought that was really cool that, somebody much smarter than myself thought of this way back in 1946. And when we think about yoga, it really is a tool, a method, a path by which you can attain total health, not just physical health or absence of disease.
I think that's a very good way of explaining things, especially because since our topic today is to talk about the role of yoga in stress. And as we know, stress has been a big problem. With people losing jobs, there is two different wars going on two different parts of the world, with the constant fear that it might spread into what could be technically termed as World War III. Millions just died out of COVID. And then we still have a huge looming epidemic of mental diseases, diabetes, cardiac disease. So I think your explanation makes sense, because in this milieu that we are there today, I think robust discussion on stress, how it affects people, and what yoga does would be a big thing. So why don't we start with sort of discussing stress and what stress does? You want to start somewhere there?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I've read is that up to 80% of chronic diseases, the ones that you mentioned, particularly cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, even cancers, are directly or indirectly linked to stress. And the prevalence of stress worldwide is over 1/3 of people have some sort of stress. 36.5%, according to one of the NIH studies, is for post-traumatic stress symptoms, 50% for psychological distress, 28% worldwide incidence of depression, 26.9% anxiety. These are huge numbers. And if we're saying that this condition contributes to chronic disease, then we're in trouble. So yeah, I would love to start with really, how do we define stress? I mean, I have some definitions. What's yours?
So I think the commonest definition that I use, especially when we are not talking to somebody who is a specialist, somebody who's in clinical medicine, is that it is body's response to any demand or challenge. That is what, in very simple term, is stress. Now, the demand or challenge can be multifarious. Like tomorrow you have an exam, and that's a demand, that's a stress also. But this is one of those few stresses which is called as good stress or eustress. Tomorrow you have to meet your boss. You have to do a presentation. So in these cases, stress is actually an extremely good thing because it increases your performance, it increases your ability to get the best out of your body and your brain to present yourself in the right way. The problem comes when this stress is not there only for a short period of time but gets prolonged, or it's not that the demand or challenge that we spoke about when we define stress is long. The demand or challenge may still be short, but your body takes that to be a prolonged, as if you're in prolonged danger. And that sort of stress, which is chronic, is called distress or dangerous stress. So clinically, stress is anything when your body or your mind or your brain is input in form of has to face some challenge or a demand to do something. If this is short lived, this is extremely good for the body, good for the mind. But when this persists, despite the actual exciting factor going away, which in other words means the thing that caused the challenge that came is actually gone. But you and your body and your mind and your emotion still thinks that you're under stress because that thing still persists or still lingers in your mind. That's what is the bad or the distress.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, the way I think about it is, a stress is a state in which an organism, or in our case, a person, is completely overwhelmed by the demands placed on them. And if you're saying that if that's for a short time, even a little bit of, we call that a challenge, right? You give me a challenge to solve this puzzle or go climb this mountain, and it's actually enjoyable. I get some pleasure out of solving that puzzle or climbing that mountain because I know that it's for a finite amount of time. But if it's prolonged, it's day after day after day. If I'm living in a condition where I feel like I'm under danger all the time, or if I'm working with someone who is constantly insulting me and putting me down, and I have no way out, I have to go to work every day for the next 30 years, then that's a state of overwhelm. And I feel at that point helpless and hopeless. So that would be the type of dangerous stress that would then contribute to some sort of chronic disease. Am I understanding you correctly?
That's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, the way you put it is perfect. That's absolutely true. And the way you explained is really, really good. That yes, if you have to climb a mountain, that is stressful too, but that stress is healthy. But if I'm continuously thinking and ruminating on something that's bad, like my job, I don't like my boss, so it's everyday fight. Even when I'm not in front of my boss, I'm sitting at the home in the evening and watching TV. My mind is ruminating. Oh, tomorrow I have to go and meet him. Tomorrow I have to feel the same things. Yes, that's I think what is typically called as distress or toxic stress. Yeah, one more thing that I want to bring up here is something called arousal. I think that is something that is important to understand when we clinically understand stress for a common people. So, what is arousal? So, we have to understand this that we as human beings didn't live in the environment that we live today. The earliest civilization we have is, say, Mohenjo-daro, which is in the Southeast Asia. That is, say, 6,000 years old. Some people say it's 10,000 years old. But we have to remember we lived on this earth between 4 to 6 million years. So when we got up in the morning, it's not that you got to see your wife, your kids, or your father or your mother. For millions of years, when you got up in the morning, you might find a large anaconda trying to slither into your cave, or a saber-toothed tiger grinning at you the moment you come out of your cave. So in those times, we had two options. We either kill this predators or we get killed. So whatever our predecessors did must have been right. And that's why you and me as human beings are the predominant and successful species on earth. Mm-hmm. Had they not done the right thing, somebody else would have been the successful species and would have dominated the earth. Now, one has to understand that this activation of the brain to face a danger is called arousal. The effect of the stress directly depends on how the arousal takes place in your brain. Everything, every action, even like if you're jealous about somebody, you're angry about somebody, it arouses the brain and you have an arousal. But what we have to understand is the brain does not understand these complex nuances of being angry, of being jealous, of being competitive, because the small part of the brain that belongs to us, an extremely advanced monkeys like orangutan, is called the cerebral cortex. It's a very thin strip of brain. 90% of the brain is the same we have with an alligator, with a crocodile, with a reptile. It's the hypothalamus, amygdala. So their behavior is exactly same as in lower animals. So when you have jealousy, your cortical brain thinks it's jealousy, but the deep or the predominant brain thinks that you're in danger. Now, if I and you were dinosaurs, and if I was jealous of you, I would have just gone and eaten you up. The problem is that I cannot eat you up, neither can anybody who's jealous of the other people. So, what happens? His jealousy causes arousal in his own body, and he releases dangerous chemicals like interleukin 6, TNF alpha, which damages his own body. His heart starts beating fast. Some people die out of it suddenly, called sudden cardiac death. And as you absolutely said, though there is no direct proof that chronic stress actually can start cancer, there is tons of research, tons of papers that proves that if you already have cancer, your prognosis gets worse because the chance of disseminating that cancer is high if you are stressed out. Though some oncologists believe that stress itself can initiate certain cancers, but that's still questionable. But you're absolutely right. There's absolutely no doubt. Starting from cancer to heart disease, to heart attack, to stroke, to sudden cardiac death, everything depends on this arousal. And if this arousal, as you correctly pointed out, is not transitory, which happens, say, when you're going for an exam, when you have eustress, but is a distress or a toxic stress, that means your arousal is there even when the activating factor has gone away. That's where the danger starts. That's where the danger lurks, leading to death, disease, and all the problems that humans face.
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts as you were speaking. One was, you think about these negative emotions, hatred, jealousy, resentment, regrets. It's like you have, hydrochloric acid in your cup. You have poison in your cup, but you're not able to throw that poison at the other person. So instead, you're drinking it yourself and constantly, damaging yourself on the inside. And of course, the other big thought was that there was a Nobel Prize from some researchers here at UCSF. Elizabeth Blackburn was the lead on that, and she showed that chronic stress leads to shorter telomeres, and shorter telomeres are related with much faster aging and all the diseases of aging, and we can consider as cancer as one of them. And of course, Dean Ornish had done some research on showing chronic stress, short telomeres associated with recurrence of prostate cancer. So there is some, at least indirect correlation there for sure.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. That's, I think you're right to the core, because that study actually one study had both Dean Ornish and Elizabeth Blackburn. And you're right. One was on cancers. There was another also on hypertension, where it was not statistically super significant, but they did show that in hypertension, there was decreased aging with the practice of meditation. But there are a lot of other studies where you look at the brain using functional MRI, which actually has shown that when you meditate, one of the biggest problem of stress is that other than having physical symptoms like headache, muscle tension, pain, fatigue, you also have emotional symptoms, exactly as you pointed out, irritability, anxiety, depression. And these also leads to behavioral problems, like you become addicted to drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, and these are very common behavior in anybody with chronic stress. But so these two studies actually are one of the practical evidences that meditation, which is part of yoga, helps. But now with the development of multiple devices like functional MRI, PET scan, we can actually peep into the brain and see what happens. And it clearly shows that many areas of the brain which are damaged due to chronic stress leading to dementia, you can grow back. Actually, your brain itself grows, the cortex grows when you practice meditation for 5 years. There's a paper in from Mass General by a lady called Sarah Laser. She actually showed for the first time that if you practice meditation, your cortical brain grows. So with over 30-35% of people above 80-85 years of age languishing in nursing homes in this country and in the entire Western world, and it's important that these are the people who don't even know their name, where they live, who their kids are. And as you know, and I know, the drugs that we have for it's not good enough. They are just a little better than a placebo for dementia. There, if you don't have to go to a doctor, just sit in your home and practice for 10-15 minutes, and it can guarantee you growth of your brain so that you never have irritability, never have depression, never have anxiety. Your brain grows, you never have dementia. What else can you ask for?
That would be amazing. Yeah, but these people that are in the nursing home because they have advanced dementia, is there some reversibility there, or is the damage already done?
The problem is we really don't know. The reason is that no study has taken that sort of the people with advanced dementia. But some of the people with early dementia have been shown to be reversed, particularly some of them with psychotic symptoms and other symptoms like irritability, violence, unwanted sexual behaviors. They have responded to meditation techniques. The problem is with people with severe dementia, number one, you're way down the line. It's difficult to reverse. Number two, they don't even understand when you talk about meditation. So you got to have some amount of cognitive skill to improve. Now, as you know, more because you've been treating patients also, that cognitive skill shows tremendous improvement with meditation. Tremendous improvement. These have been studied. There are more than 100 papers on this. Cognitive skill, learning ability, memory, so executive functioning. I mean, there have been people who have been given just 4 weeks of meditation, and they did computer guided test of IQs 100 times better than people who have not undergone this amount of meditation. So it's important to understand that it does improve a lot. Now, answering your question is difficult to say unless we have a real study. But what I can say based on results we have till today is yes, mild, maybe even medium amount of dementia, but still you have some cognitive facility remaining. There certainly is a way to go back. But as I said, we just don't have the data for severe dementic people.
Thank you. Can we take a step back here and actually, can you walk us through what happens when when I'm chronically stressed? What is happening inside my body? Like what's producing chemically, what's producing that sensation of irritability, of being angry, of not being able to sleep, of being having heart palpitations, of my hands sweating, I'm constantly on the edge. What's happening inside? Is my brain producing something, or is my adrenal glands producing something? Please give us a glimpse of that.
Yeah, so when that happens, basically a couple of things is happening. As I said, brain does not understand the nuances of modern day behavior or modern day emotions like jealousy and all those things. So brain has only two things to understand. First is either you're safe, you're not getting harmed by anything, or you're unsafe and you can be eaten by a predator. So when you're jealous about somebody, obviously you're not getting eaten by any predator, but that's the only way brain has learned. And 10,000 years of civic life has not changed anything because we lived for 4 million years. 4 to 6 million years is nothing compared to 10,000 years. So your brain is still the animal reptilian brain that a reptile has, who are animals. We are just another animal. We are just a more sophisticated animal. So what happens in the brain is and body is three things. Number one, our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of the autonomic nervous system, gets activated and we flips onto the sympathetic side. Why? So sympathetic side is that nerve which says that you got to run or you got to kill this predator. So if you have to kill this predator, you need a lot of hormones in your blood called adrenaline. So your body is pumped with adrenaline. So when you have a body pumped with adrenaline, you start sweating, your heart starts going faster and faster. But the blood vessels supplying blood or nutrition to the important organs of your body, like your brain, like your kidneys, like your heart, they become smaller and smaller so that less and less blood goes there. Then where does all the blood go? as you know, we have approximately 5 to 6 liters of blood. All your blood goes to the muscles of your legs, muscles of your hand. Why? Because your job is to kill the so-called predator waiting to kill you. So you either run or you kill it. All that reason, all you need is a powerful muscle. Now, when you're jealous, you don't need all the blood to go there. You need your blood to be in all your important organs. So that's the first thing. So you sweat, your legs get filled with blood, there's decreased blood flow to your heart, there's blood flow to your kidneys. You can't think, you can't have a lot of cognitive skills because your brain is not given the amount of blood it needs. So that's one thing. Second thing that it does, which is even more dangerous or diabolical, is because you're going to fight, your general immunity that prevents you from, say, catching, say, a COVID virus, or you have eaten something and that whatever you have eaten has got some salmonella, and those bugs can go and cause severe diarrhea in you. But the body thinks that these diarrhea or getting infected by COVID and the protection against it is not important. Because if you are dying, then there's no use trying to protect you from a virus that is going to come in the future. So what body does, it shuts down your immunity. So when it shuts down your immunity, you're basically an open place to get all sort of infection. We have to remember, COVID is not something flying out from China. COVID is there in the air. Pneumonia is there in the air. We have thousands and millions of bugs surrounding us. The only reason we don't get infected is because we have a solid immunological system which fights these viruses, bugs on a daily basis. Now, what happens if you close the switch? You stop your body from protecting yourself. That's exactly what happens when you're stressed out, when you're anxious.
So what you're saying is that in a time of stress or perceived stress by the body, all the energy, all the resources are being spent on what the body thinks it needs to do to keep you alive in that moment. So it's like a wartime economy. So all the repair and rejuvenation and future planning and rest and digest type of things that we do for maintaining the infrastructure in the country is put on hold.
That's correct. Absolutely correct.
So it's a wartime thinking as opposed to a peacetime. When it's peacetime, that's when all the good things happen to keep us healthy and alive and keep all the systems well lubricated and repaired and working in the long term. But during stress, the nature has made us that way. In a sense, that was a good adaptation when there were saber-toothed tigers and anacondas outside the cave, because we would need to focus all our energy on staying alive. As opposed to now, we don't have those dangers, but we still have those same mechanisms, and they're actually harming us because we've changed the environment. And by being in that state of stress, which is mostly psychological stress now, we are making those repair mechanisms a lower priority than they should be. They should be the highest priority to keep us alive, to keep us healthy, to keep all the systems working properly for a long time if we want to live to 100.
Oh, that's absolutely correct. That's a very beautiful way of putting it. And in fact, the point that you made makes real sense, because we have to remember this, that whereas the caveman who did face these animals while he went out hunting, but the rest of the 24 hours, he's back into his cave sleeping. So he makes up for that small period when he's severely stressed out. But a human being today, because of psychological stress, he may be stressed because he's waiting in the traffic. He needs to get to his job in time. That's a very important point that you made, that psychological stress. So even if we take the case of the caveman faces this danger only in that small period of time, maybe hour or two in the entire 24 hours when he goes out hunting to gather his food. The rest of the time, he's possibly sleeping inside his cave, safe and sound. But that's not true for the man of today who has psychological stress 24/7. Early morning, he has to run to his office. He gets stopped by bumper to bumper traffic, so he's stressed out. He has to drop his son or daughter to school in the right time. And then he has to meet a boss who's not so friendly. So this is a stress that goes on 24/7. So there is no break from it. And what is worse is one has to understand this concept. This is a little difficult to understand, but it's important to understand. The brain is like a computer. So brain wants to get better in whatever it does. So if my brain is constantly processing anxiety, depression, stress, it wants to get better. So even in things which would not be stressful for me today, tomorrow my brain will want to make those stressful also, because brain thinks it's doing this for my survival, which
Right.
actually it's not. It's just doing the opposite. But that's how we as an animal have grown up for this 4 million years. And that's the way yoga comes in, that you, all that yoga does, it transcends you from an animal brain to a human brain and maybe to a superhuman brain. That's all it does. It makes
Excellent.
you understand the reality.
Thank you. I was hoping that you would mention yoga and we can make that segue, because our discussion is about yogic sciences and the evidence behind yoga and how we apply it to make the lives of 9 billion earthlings better. So this is a wonderful time. I think, yeah, let's transition over now. We understand stress is bad. Chronic stress, psychological stress is what we're facing. It is the basis of all the bad things that are happening to us. We understand the reason for it is that the body is shifting into a wartime mode as opposed to peacetime mode of rest and repair, when we can fix everything and keep the systems working, keep the immune system working, keep the surveillance systems working, so that we can detect pathogens, detect cancer cells, detect bad things, and take care of them before they become a real problem. But with stress, those systems are shut down. And with yoga, we can reactivate them, reactivate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one that counterbalances the sympathetic. We can reactivate those rest, repair, rejuvenation systems so that we can keep the body working for a long time. So, how does yoga come in, and how is yoga the antidote to all this?
So, yoga is an antidote in multiple ways. So, number one, what yoga does, as I said, it brings about both physiological as well as anatomical changes in the brain. Now, what does physiological means? Physiological means the chemicals that I just spoke to you about. Similarly, yoga causes release of other chemicals. For example, most of the people all over the world know of a drug called Valium. It makes you sleep, it makes you sleep, it calms you down. So Valium works through a receptor called the GABA receptors. Yoga actually increases GABA of your brain. And so when GABA is increased, of course, lowers your stress, lowers your anxiety level. It increases dopamine, it increases oxytocin. So oxytocin is a bonding chemical. So a pregnant mother, once it delivers a child, releases tons of oxytocin that helps in bonding between the mother and the child. So in a normal human being also, oxytocin causes bonding. So when you have high level of oxytocin, even if I do something which is generally irritable or not to your favor, you will excuse me. But when your oxytocin is low, you tend to be more aggressive against me. So this giving up, this gratitude, this letting other people, not being judgmental, all these activities are activated when you have a ton of oxytocin, serotonin in your brain. And then we talk about drugs today. We talk about marijuana being allowed in many places. What about the drug really stuffed inside the brain by nature, endorphins, which are million times more powerful than the opium you get in the market? So there is tons of evidence now. Going into deep meditation, you actually release endorphins. And these endorphins can not only make you calm, anxious, less anxiety, less depression, but make you super happy. A word that in Sanskrit is ananda or bliss. It gives you more than happiness. And these are released deep inside your brain. So these are the physiological changes. Similarly, there are anatomical changes also. For example, those places in deep inside the brain, which I said we share with our dinosaur brothers or our reptilian brothers, the crocodile is the hippocampus and the amygdala. These places deal with emotion, and some of these deal with aggressive emotion. Like if you go near a crocodile, it'll just eat you. Not that it thinks that you're danger, it just eats you. So this sort of reaction is also there in human beings, but it's a cerebral cortex which suppresses these feelings. Now they did a study where they took young kids in Hungary, brought up in foster homes, who were abused during their teenage times. So they did a functional MRI on these kids, and they found they had a very powerful amygdala and hypothalamus. They had severe amount of anxiety, PTSD, depression. So these guys were taken for meditation, and when they practiced 4 to 6 weeks of meditation as part of yoga, the size and the chemical prominence of hippocampus and amygdala as seen by functional MRI decreased. So their aggressive behavior and their PTSD symptoms. So what meditation? So these are the anatomical changes. Those part of the brain which is more animal-like, they get suppressed, and those are part of the brain like the prefrontal cortex, which gives you better emotional and impulse control, which makes you focused on the work you did, which increases your concentration, which makes you a better decision making, which gives you better self control, which helps you to get out of different addictions. Those increase in size.
Okay,
So
so I'm going to ask you to pause here, so because there was a lot there, so I'm going to see if I can summarize it a little bit for our audience. So you said that when we practice yoga, and we were specifically talking about the meditation aspect of yoga, to be very clear, not the asanas. We talked about that earlier. Yoga is more of a brain discipline, a mind training discipline. When we do that, we activate relaxing chemicals or chemicals that help us behave in a calmer manner. You mentioned GABA, and for the audience, I would just like to clarify that that's actually stands for gamma aminobutyric
butyric
acid,
acid.
GABA, and it is something that it's a neurotransmitter. So it's something that's released in the brain, and it is a chemical messenger for other brain cells that tells them to slow down by blocking specific signals in the central nervous system, and it thus produces a calming effect. It is also has a effect to block pain receptors, and in fact, gabapentin is one of a common drug that's used, also known as Neurontin, that is commonly used to treat nerve pain. So we talked about GABA. You also mentioned oxytocin. Oxytocin is also a calming chemical, brain chemical neurotransmitter that is released by yoga. It's also released when you give somebody a hug or have sex, right? So it's produced by intimacy, and when we have more oxytocin, it helps us respond in a more compassionate and thoughtful manner rather than an impulsive and aggressive manner. So we talked about GABA and oxytocin. Then you talked about the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which again helps us to respond in a thoughtful manner rather than react. And the reactive part of the brain you mentioned is the amygdala. And in children that are kept in a hostile environment, or prison inmates, or prisoners of war, or people that have been exposed to harsh conditions, whether it's starvation or natural disasters or war conditions, will have larger amygdala, right? So this is the part of the brain that is responsible for, again, that aggressive and fear, the fight or flight type of responses, as opposed to the prefrontal cortex, which is larger in people that are practicing yoga and specifically meditation, where again that part of the brain that we want to be larger for us to be able to be more emotionally intelligent in our interactions with other people, so that if I'm rude to Indranil today, maybe he's going to forgive me faster if he has more oxytocin, more GABA, more of a prefrontal cortex. And I know he will, because he's a yogi and he's a meditator. But if someone like myself, who's maybe not that adept, might burst out and say something rude or angry more quickly and then regret it because I would say something that I should not have said. Is that a decent summary of what you're saying?
That's a perfect summary. I mean, I couldn't have done it better. Perfect summary. Absolutely. Being non-judgmental, and as you said, exactly. That's exactly what oxytocin does. So you couldn't have done it better. I couldn't have done it better than what you just said and explained in very simple terms.
Beautiful. So we've also heard about like Zen Buddhism and philosophies like yin yang in Zen Buddhism. And is that the same as what we're talking about, or is that something
different? It's same. So what we have to understand is Buddha was born in India. Buddhism, present date, it's Nepal, but technically it was part of India at that part of time. And then he Buddhism started 400 years after Buddha, and King Ashoka was the first ruler who actually pushed Buddhism. His own son became Buddhist monk, and he created the entire group, and then it started spreading. Now, when it spread to different countries, particularly the three different type of spread, one was to China, one was to Cambodia, Thailand, and the third was to Japan. They amalgamated the basic teaching of Buddha along with the local cultures, giving rise to all these things. So the basic concept is same as what Buddha said. Now, one has to understand, and that's frequently not understood, is that Buddhism is not a religion that is really started by Buddha. What Buddha did was, what happened during Buddha's time was that the religion of Hinduism in its highest form was degraded, with people indulging in a bunch of rituals which were meaningless. So the core of the Hinduism, which is the Advaita philosophy, has no rituals. There has no, we have hundreds and thousands of gods in day-to-day Hinduism. There's nothing like that in the core Advaita philosophy. So all that Buddha did is Buddha wanted to take back Hinduism to its pristine original form. And that continued to almost 400 years after Buddha, till people thought that we should change it into a different religion and spread it accordingly. Now, that's why if you look carefully, other than very minor nuances like what is God, does God exist? Buddha did not believe God existed. Very little difference between so-called Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism. So you're absolutely right. All these different aspects of Buddhism mirror the core Hinduism very much, with appropriate changes that has been brought about depending on which culture practices is what has been. Like Japanese culture has been different, so they have one type. The Cambodian Thai culture has been different. The Chinese have been a little more different. And that's where all these different terms and terminologies have come up, with minor to medium level differences from the original meditation or yoga teaching of Advaita Vedanta.
So what is yin yang? Is that
Yeah, yin yang is, you see, that the good and the bad. So everything in the world, the core Hinduism says there's nothing called good, nothing called bad. It's all in your brain.
So Advaita means non-duality. So there's no difference between good and bad, no difference between you and me. We are all part of the same.
Part of the same. And this duality is a virtual truth being created by our brain, because our brain is steeped in mechanical things like I want this, I want that, I want to achieve this, I want to achieve that. So when the brain is not concentrated into one thought, one sound, one breath, it is fractured into multiple thought, and that's where yin yang, all those comes around. You, me, all those comes around. So the core philosophy of Advaita or Buddhism is when you start concentrating into one place, which could be a thought, which could be a sound. In Hinduism, it's called the Anahata Nada, which is the sound coming out when you practice meditation for a long time. And you could walk down the 7th Street in New York with 10,000 taxis honking behind you, still you could be in that meditation. Or just follow your breath. A lot of things like Vipassana and all has following the breath. You can follow your breath 24/7, 365, or you can, Vipassana has following the sensations that come in your body. So whatever is it, when you don't concentrate and your mind is fractured, you live in this virtual reality of yin and yang. But when you are concentrated, they all melt into the complete blackness of the absolute. Absolute in Buddhism and Hinduism is almost the same, where the physical characteristic of this material universe dissolves into an entity which is called the so-called absolute, which is difficult to define. But basically, all these various nuances of modern day physical existence completely stops. And that's the beginning of meditation, which in Hinduism or yoga has a special name, and that name is called samadhi. And of course, samadhi is of different levels. You can have sarvakalpa samadhi, you can have nirvikalpa samadhi, but we will not go into that today. But that's what it is, that when you don't have the mind concentrated enough, you dwell into the reality of present day existence. You have all this fractured thoughts, fractured mind, fractured emotions. But once you start dwelling into the depth of the absolute, they all vanish like magic.
Beautiful, beautiful. So it sounds like there is a lot of power in meditation, in yoga, in actually helping us quell the storm, the fire within that is essentially burning us up and destroying everything. So we need to figure out ways to extinguish that fire, or at least reduce its intensity, so that we can have an active immune system, have an active cancer surveillance system, have active repair mechanisms to digest the food, get the nutrients out of our food properly, and be healthy for a long period of time. So if I have had stress for a long time, because I have, living in this stressful world that we live in, how long would it take for me to see some results if I start yoga practice today?
So, depending on if you start practicing the entire gamut of yoga, which means some asanas, breathing, and meditation, it will take not more than 3 to 4 weeks. Within 3 to 4 weeks, you can change yourself. Not only can you change, you'll feel that you are changing yourself on a daily basis. So, the question is that first 4 weeks should be, you need to be very aggressive and proactive, because initial period is little difficult, because the logical mind is our biggest enemy, and the logical mind will tell you, logify it by saying, oh, you're wasting your time, why are you doing all this nonsense, you could do some other work, you could earn more money doing this, or you could maybe complete a patient's report. Other than that, you're wasting time early in the morning. So the logical mind has to be shut down, because you have to remember the logical mind is the biggest problem in this universe. We are slave to our logical mind. Unfortunately, the logical mind, though it is called the logical mind, it has nothing to do with logic. It is completely actually illogical, because this logical mind is centered around the core concept that we discuss, fight or flight. It is trying to see what is putting you in danger. Doing something as useless as sitting down and trying to meditate is useless. Why don't I finish my job? Maybe seeing one more patient, maybe finishing the patient's chart, or talking to my wife as what the plans is for the evening. So the so-called logical mind actually forces you to do illogical things, because it thinks that that is more important than doing meditation or yoga. But if you can force your mind and be proactive for the first 2 to 3 weeks, then you will slowly see that you will slowly come into your control, and the so-called logical mind will fade, and you will be in control of everything. Because remember, ultimately, you're the master. It's not your mind, not your body. But unfortunately, 99% of our time, we are unfortunately not the master, but the slave of our so-called logical mind, which unfortunately is anything but logical. It's actually masquerading to be a logical, but basically it is illogical, and it is based completely on emotions and non-logical basis, like what we just explained.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. Yeah, that's actually is my experience too, because since our last conversation, I've been sitting and just focusing on my breath for about 8 to 10 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. And I am seeing some very noticeable changes in my perception and my attitude and my responses to other people and the way that I connect with them too. So it definitely works. Now, can I just stop and I'll have these long-lasting effects, or am I going to go back to my stressed out self if I stop?
So the question is that you'll never ever go back to that. There is what we call a threshold, and the threshold is exactly as what we just discussed. You need to bring out those anatomical changes in the brain and the physiological changes in your body. Now, that doesn't mean you have to practice for 10 years before you stop falling back. No, that can happen in 2 to 3 weeks, 2 to 3 months, or 6 months. Now, we do not know how long it takes in every. See, every individual is different. If you have a twin brother or twin sister, he or she might be different than you, despite the fact that you guys share a ton of your genes and other things. So every human being is different. But the fact is that you do need to practice for at least a couple of months. In my practical experience, between at least 6 months to a year, where you can make subsequent changes both in your brain anatomy, as we spoke about, as well as in your physiology, so that these things wouldn't bother you and you will not be forced to become a slave of your so-called logical brain again. There are ways to find that out, how we do that, and we are trying to get better and better ways to find out. But one of the ways to find out is doing EEG of your brain. Most people, when we do a EEG of the brain, you'll find abnormal waves called beta waves going on in the brain. Beta waves are fast waves. This is the normal wave of a normal human being. So when you're stressed out, you get beta waves. You get high beta waves, very stressed out. Now, when you close your eyes and you try to meditate, if I do EEG, some parts of your brain, the frontal cortex and the back of your brain, you might see there is slower waves called the alpha waves. They are extremely slow waves. They are alpha waves. People who are meditators, they have even slower waves, delta wave, theta waves. Now, using different instruments, which are now costly, we can, like EEG with say 180 all over, wearing an EEG cap in your brain, we can pick up EKGs and EEGs in different parts of the brain to find out which parts of the brain are there. There has been study in this country in meditators who have meditated more than 20,000 hours or 30,000 hours or 40,000 hours. They have a super fast wave, which is even faster than the beta wave. That's called gamma waves. And these people have been found to be extremely powerful. They have a good memory. They have extremely good memory. They have other skills that's not very much explained by modern science. For example, they will pick up things that is going to happen in the future and stuff like that, which almost verges on being miraculous. Now, there's been a study in Princeton about some of these so-called ESP, and we don't have a scientific understanding why it happens. We know it happens. But what we do know is the brain changes as you practice meditation. But the unfortunate part is, and that's where the caveat is, we still don't have instrument which say people like you and me can sit in our homes and find out how good my meditation is. I mean, you're not going to a massive lab worth $5 million to do that every day, right? Those are only for experimental purposes. So we need to have better instruments. We're sitting in our home, we can find out if our oxygenation is increasing, if our brain has got not beta, but alpha waves and stuff like that. But technology is improving, and there'll come a day with all this AI and other things being hot nowadays. Maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we will be having things where we can sit in our homes and find out when is the point when you'll no more flip back, but you will continue to be only progressing after that. But to give you a simple answer, it could be 6 months for you, it could be 10 years for me, it could be 3 weeks for somebody else, but there is no fixed time. Everybody is different. How aggressive you are, you practice twice a day, at least 1 to 2 hours, you'll get much better result than somebody practicing like 5 minutes, forgetting to practice half of the day. So all those are multiple variables that need to be taken into consideration before we can actually say how long or how much is required.
Okay, so to summarize, you said there's beta waves and there's alpha waves, theta and delta. And when we are actively engaging our minds, or such as this conversation, or we're driving, or we're working, for most people, we're spending most of our days in sort of the thinking, quote unquote, logical, analytical mind state. Would it be fair to say that we spend most of our waking hours in the beta wave
Absolutely.
state?
Absolutely. Unless you're a regular meditator, that's where, like, I can be talking with you and I can still be in alpha waves or in delta waves. And there are a lot of monks who have been seen to do mathematics. They've been given mathematical problem, like they're solving mathematical problem, but yet they're deep theta waves. So the brain is completely relaxed. Brain is understanding that it is not under threat. But
Okay.
beta wave is where normal people are. They are always analytical, always trying to be logical. Despite being logical, actually it's illogical rather than being logical. And always thinks that you're in some sort of a danger, and you need to keep alert, awake. Your heart needs to beat at the right amount. Your kidneys need to be super functioning. So basically, your entire body in some sort of a stress, trying to improve its, sort of within inverted commas, improve its function.
Right.
But in the long run, that's what stress is all about. It actually decreases the function, gives you diseases and stuff like that.
And what are the brain waves when we're sleeping?
So that depends on what sort of sleep it is. Most one, you generally push on into theta waves once you go into NREM sleep. But in that 45 minutes of REM sleep, we are mostly in the delta. And but again, and that's how we came to know of these waves, because we didn't know that maybe even 20-30 years back, we didn't even have a clue that you could be awake and not have delta. It is now with these meditators coming under scans and PET and EEG and functional MRI, we realized that even somebody alert, awake, can be in their delta waves.
But so that was the point of my question. That's the point of my question is, so you answered it in that if you are meditating, your brain is in the same state as it would be in either a dream sleep, which is REM, or a non-dream deeper sleep, which is non-REM, i.e. delta or theta state, while you're actually awake and somewhat alert.
Correct.
Wow. So how does one begin? I mean, are there some specific practices that you can show us, or at least tell us the names of, where viewers could easily start something to cope up with work stress?
So the first thing that I would say is, whenever you feel stress, the best thing is to start with is doing what is called the Ujjayi breath. So meditation and breathing techniques come together because breathing decreases stress. So we have something called Ujjayi breath, where you basically sit straight, keep your spinal cord completely straight, look straight up, not up, straight, facing straight, but your eyes should turn upwards as if you're looking at your forehead somewhere up here. You're looking up there, and then slowly you close the eyes. Then take slow but long and deep breaths. Breathe in slowly, and as you breathe in slowly, feel that air going from your nostrils to your forehead to your brain, and then again slowly breathe out. Again, the breaths, I'll show you how. The breath should be very slow, so that the total number of breaths in, say, 1 minute should not be more than maybe 6, 7, 8, or 9, or 10. Normal human breathes between 14 and 18, and that's why human live till maybe 80 years or 100 years. A tortoise will breathe 5 times a minute. A tortoise lives for 200 years, 250 years. The oldest one is about 300 years old, I think, if I'm not mistaken. A rat will breathe at 30, 40 times a minute. The rat lives for less than a year, 2 years, compared to human years, I mean, not the rat years, human years. So slower you breath, you live longer, and you can cool up your mind, your thoughts will go away. So we close our eyes in the way I said, take long, deep breath. As you breathe in, feel the air coming in through your nose, going to your brain. So I'm going to show you how you take slow, deep breath. This is called the Ujjayi breath. After you breathe in, hold your breath here for a couple of seconds, then slowly breathe out. As you breathe out, you can feel the air again going out through your nostrils. Take another long and deep breath. Breathe in slowly but powerfully. Hold your breath for a few seconds and then slowly breathe out. We can open our eyes now. I'm going to tell you a couple of things that you do when you do this breath. First thing is, feel that air that is coming up. Try to feel that air. Is it cold? Is it hot? So when you breathe in, you will feel the air is cold coming in. So feel that feeling. You should feel the material of the air, the speed of the air. So as you practice, go more and more, this area of your nostrils, or the labia of your the upper part of your lips, this part, you'll slowly get sensitized and you can feel the air coming in. And so every time you do that, you'll feel the air coming in, cold air coming in, going up, then hot air coming out. Practice it for 6 7 times whenever you're in stress. If you're in your office or you're taking your lunch, before you eat food, do it for a couple of 6 7 times. You'll see your stress will come down. Before you get to drive and face a long line of cars bumper to bumper, you get stressed out, sit in your office for 2 3 seconds, maybe a minute. Practice it. More you practice this, slowly you'll come to the habit of feeling that air, feeling your breath. The idea is, when you feel your breath, when you see your breath coming in, that itself blocks all the thoughts. So from a fractured brain, you're basically trying to create one single powerful brain. When your thoughts come down, immediately, remember, a brain is like a picture that we are seeing day to day. So if you want to go to Hawaii and I take you to Hawaii, or I make you sit down in your own home and show you a nice sea island picture of Hawaii in your TV or in your wall poster, what people don't understand is the same parts of the brain is activated. And that's a very important concept. When you're physically in Hawaii or when you're sitting in your home, so when your mind is thinking of stress, your mind is really not thinking of stress. You are throwing yourself into that stress environment. That is very important to understand. So why would you perpetuate and ruminate like a cow? Cow takes in food, puts it into the stomach, brings it back to the mouth, and goes on chewing it 24 hours. So basically, we humans are worse than cows, because that's what we do. Our thoughts are ruminating inside our brain 24 hours. The danger is gone, the event is gone, its consequences are gone, but you don't want the consequence to go. You want to ruminate it in your brain. So you're physically suffering every second of the minute that you exist. And that's what breathing and meditation separates. So you practice this for a couple of minutes. After you practice breathing, just sit down there, keep your spinal cord straight, keep your hand on your lap, and just sit down for a few minutes till you find that thoughts come in. Then you can either get up, or moment thoughts comes in, again start breathing for a couple of times, and again sit for a few minutes. You need to do for a couple of minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, evening. You have a break in your office during lunch, you can sit there and do it. I mean, you can go to a washroom and do it if you're busy in your office, or if you have a shared office. It's just sit, and just practice for a few seconds. It doesn't matter what environment it is, as long as you are not disturbed. You can just sit there and do it. More the times you do, more you'll change your brain, more you'll increase dopamine, more you'll increase serotonin, more you'll increase GABA. You'll decrease sympathetic discharges, and you'll go into the other autonomic nervous system, which is called parasympathetic, which makes you calm, which makes you cool, which makes you restful, which increases your digestion, which prevents you from, as you just correctly said, from feeling irritable, from sweating. All those are blocked. So those nervous system gets activated, your parasympathetic gets activated. And the moment your parasympathetic gets activated, thought processes that is automatically happening in the brain stops, and you immediately feel that calmness, coolness, and lack of stress.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wow, this is so powerful. Couple of questions come up. One immediately came up as we were doing this, and I get asked this question, so I'm going to ask you. Certainly I could feel the calming effect, and I'm getting more relaxed, and things are not bothering me. Would that make someone passive? And I don't know if I want to use the word lazy, but less able to react and respond. I mean, some people argue that for example, a place like India was conquered so many times and invaders kept coming. And was that because people were so relaxed and calm doing their yoga that they didn't really feel the need to aggressively fight back when they were being attacked, or is that not the case?
No, that may have been the case, and sometimes they say the rise of Buddhism may have been responsible for that, but I don't know. But the point that I do want to make is very clear. The core of yoga says you to be passive, to you to be calm, cool. That doesn't mean it wants to make you lazy. You have to react back when it's reacted. Not only you have to react back, you have to react back with that amount of vigilance, with that amount of violence as required. If you look at the core of yoga is of course the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, but Bhagavad Gita also sort of the cream of what yoga is. So there, this so-called Godhead actually says that you got to take arms to fight for the truth. So yoga doesn't say you that you should be lazy. Somebody comes and hits you, kicks you, take your thing, which is logically should be yours, and just because you want to be passive and you sit down. No, that's not yoga. That is some nonsense.
Well, and then in Christianity, people, Jesus is, I mean, the quote that, be, loving to your neighbor, and if someone slaps you on one cheek, you put the other cheek forward, is attributed to Jesus. But the Bible also says that there's a time for peace and there's a time for war.
Yeah. So the question is the same exactly. So I mean, you correctly said when Jesus, they were pinning him up against the cross. He said, "God, these guys don't know what they're doing. Excuse them." So that shows his greatness. I mean, his greatness. But having said that, it is also important to understand that that's a personal lifestyle, and we cannot mistake that with a country trying to fight invaders. So if you invade, not only do you lose your religion, but you lose your culture, you lose your authentic, you lose everything. Like what India lost for, like, say, thousands of years, we had different rules. Initially from the invaders from Asia, and then the British rule in India. So personal level practices are different from what a community should do. If the community is in danger, yoga doesn't say that you should still sit in meditation. Otherwise, the so-called Godhead, whether it existed or really did not exist, I don't care. But what I do care is everything that he says is basically the philosophy, which basically says you have to fight for the truth. And if that fight means killing your old one in your own ones, doesn't matter, because untruth cannot succeed ever.
Right.
So that's the core. So there's no question that yoga does not support being passive towards people being wronged, towards being passive towards wrong philosophy, wrong thoughts, any form of abuse. Even if you are abused, you should fight for it, because that is not being yoga, that is anti-yoga. So it's very important to discern these two aspects and understand something that is a personal lifestyle for making yourself better, and something that's a policy of a country or a nation or a community. One cannot be thrown into the other and said, okay, so yoga says to keep calm, so we'll become a passive, useless community where everybody will come and abuse us. No, that's not what yoga says.
And I would make the counter argument to that, which is that if I can channelize my energy and be more thoughtful and be more focused and be non-judgmental and less reactive, then I have all this energy inside me that is available for me to use righteously at the right time, rather than wasting it on things that are irrelevant. I think that,
and actually, that's a very, very good way of saying it, because that's the perfect way. Because you remember the sequence in Mahabharata when Arjuna, one of the, is speaking to the Godhead, and he is looking at the general from the other side who is related to him as his grandfather, and said, "How can I kill him?" So the Godhead tells Arjuna that you're not killing anybody. You're fighting for the absolute truth. So as you exactly said, your concentration is just going to be there. You're not going to see a person. You're not going to see your grandfather. You're not going to see the general on the other side. Only thing that you see, and that's what Arjuna does. He concentrates. They have the story goes, it is an arrow. So he concentrates. He closes his eyes. He sees the general on the other side, throws the arrow, and that person falls to the ground. So you're absolutely right. Actually, it makes you concentrate, gets your energy to the point which you can never get with a fractured brain and a fractured body and emotionally depraved sense of feeling. Then when you actually meditate or practice yoga, that's a very good way that you actually put that in.
Thank you so much, Dr. Basure. As always, it's been such an enlightening conversation. You've certainly started me on a journey that I'm not going to turn back from, and certainly going to do these practices for the rest of my life to be free of stress. And there's just one small story that comes to mind. I'm sure you know this well. There was a yogi sitting next to someone on a flight, right, going on a long flight. It was turbulent, and this guy was a rich businessman, and he was getting so nervous, and he's ordering drink after drink, and he's ordering alcohol from the flight stewardess, while this yogi is just smiling and sitting there quietly, not even saying anything, probably doing his ujjayi breathing. And finally, the businessman looks to him and says, "Aren't you going to get something to drink?" And the yogi just smiles at him and it says, "I'm making my own."
That's true.
He's making his own GABA and oxytocin and endorphins. He doesn't need any drugs from the outside to be happy.
That's correct.
Thanks again for this fantastic conversation. I know it's been long, and we can probably go for another hour or two. But let you have any closing thoughts, and then we can wrap it up.
No, thank you very much for this opportunity. I think the best is my guru, one who taught me this to be in this path, always said 1 ton of theory is equal to 1 ounce of practice. So theory is good, but it doesn't help. If I don't inculcate it in my life, it doesn't help. I mean, I don't care who has become Buddha or who has become Jesus Christ. My question is, can I become Buddha or can I become Jesus Christ? And Hindu philosophy, or the core of Hindu philosophy, which Advaita Vedanta says, everybody will become the ultimate, because that's how the universe is made. So let's start practicing, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 5 seconds. Let's start that, and let's try to increase. And then you will also, as he said, you'll make your own drink. It'll be the most powerful alcohol you ever had in your life. Unfortunately, that alcohol is not available in the market, or that drug or that marijuana is not made in the market. It's only there inside you. So the God or nature, whatever you believe in, has stuffed all these good things, all these good drinks, all the most powerful drugs, right? Your brain is a complete pharmacy. It has given you Valium. It has given you the world's most powerful alcohol. It has given you the world's most powerful opium. So what else do you need? Start using those, and you'll be a happy man.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Vasudeva.